Now, in democratic societies, citizens tend to think of government officials as their representatives, right? So, in democracy, well, the government officials represent us. That's what we think. But it is not obvious what the ideal linkage between citizens and government officials should be. So it is easy to say that government officials, decision makers, or politicians represent us, but what would be the ideal, say, method, feature, or appearance of representation? Some political scientists believe this is ideal, so-called descriptive representation. You'll see something interesting here. Mirror. Some political scientists believe that government officials should mirror the characteristics of citizens they represent. So they should look exactly like the people that they represent. And this principle is known as descriptive representation. The bad news is that political elites hardly ever mirror the citizens they represent on any of the potentially important issues such as race, class, ethnicity, gender, language, and age. Well, I don't know. Well, since this person is a public figure, I suppose I cannot name the person. Is the person 안철수 a typical resident of 노원구? Meaning that those people living in 노원구 have same type of education and wealth as 안철수. I asked you. Yes or no? No, right? I single-picked a person, but it is the case everywhere. Looking at the Korean National Assembly, U.S. Senate, or in African countries somewhere, European countries somewhere, the political elites look very different from the people that they represent. Okay? Although some political scientists advocate mirroring, mirroring is not taking place anywhere. Even in democracies, political leaders tend to be middle or upper class background. So even in the most democratized countries, who becomes politicians? Usually rich people, not a poor person. Okay? Even in communist countries, or former communist countries, despite their ideologies of working class revolution, those countries could not avoid this class bias. Now, in a communist country, everybody is supposed to be equal, and well, you've heard of the dictatorship of proletariat, right? So working class rules. That didn't happen in communist countries. for economic development, they inevitably have to depend on trained technicians, meaning that highly educated folks. And in the last decade of its existence, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union increasingly consisted of well-educated persons recruited from the regional party organizations, the army, and the bureaucracy. So even in communist countries, mirroring never happened, and political elites under communism tended to be better educated and better living than those people that they supposedly represented. So on surface, mirroring looks like a very good practice, but it's very difficult to achieve it anyway. Okay, we're discussing descriptive representation, which means that the representatives or leaders should mirror the characteristics of those that they represent, which hardly happens. And we found out that even in communist countries, there was little mirroring, and Communist Party's leadership did not mirror the working class background of average Soviet folks at that time. Now we can see some other aspect of mirroring and whether, so we actually looked at the class aspect, but how about gender aspect? Women have traditionally been poorly represented in political leadership positions in most countries. I'm sure that this room is filled with women with political aspirations, right? So it will change in Korea. In most countries, women did not have the right to vote until well into the 20th century. So they didn't have, even the right to vote, let alone right to run for the office until the 20th century. And women have not held many political leadership positions. But that changed significantly in the 1980s and 90s. And women have held the chief executive office in a growing number of countries, particularly in Europe and Asia. And the most famous female chief executive is probably Margaret Thatcher, whom we have talked about several times already. She was Britain's longest serving prime minister for about 11-12 years in modern times, and a highly effective and influential political leader, and also very conservative and charismatic leader as well. But women's advancement has been uneven, so it was not happening everywhere, and their representation remains low in the developing world. Okay? But, we made a huge progress last year, right? In December of last year. And we picked women as our chief executive. And who just made a successful summit with the U.S. President Obama. Now, then how about age? Political elites also tend to be unrepresentative with respect to age. In many countries, chief executives and legislatives under 40 are rare, right? I wonder if we'll ever see the chief executive under 40. Probably not. There were legislators in their 20s and 30s before. As far as I remember, Kim Il-sung, when he was first elected to the National Assembly, he was in his 20s. So we have president, but we do not have one right now. And a large proportion of leading politicians are past normal retirement age. Well, in Korea, the normal retirement age used to be 55, now it's 60, right? But chief executive and many legislators are over 60 anyway. I wonder how old Park Geun-hye is. Do you guys know? So she's over retirement age and starting a new career. So one thing good about political jobs is that there is no mandatory retirement. You can be involved forever. There was a U.S. senator by the name of Strom Thurmond. He couldn't really function very well in his later years, and other people had to help him to sign bills, that sort of thing, but he served until his mid-90s. So, and the thing is that the people of South Carolina kept electing him and sent him back to the Congress. Anyway, and speaking of education, in many countries, university graduates and often lawyers and civil servants, in particular, are vastly overrepresented. So, higher or highly educated folks tend to be overrepresented in the political circle. So if you have political aspirations, keep attending schools. Okay? On the other hand, ethnic, linguistic, and religious minorities are often underrepresented. This situation has little to do with Korean situation, right? Although increasingly we have so-called multicultural family, right? So that this may become an issue later on. Isn't it true that one of the parties named a woman who is married to Korean man but originally from foreign country as one of their party list candidate, and this person is now member of the National Assembly? Yeah, Jasmine Lee, right? But she was born elsewhere, right? So we are making progress. We are already tackling the issue of ethnic minority group underrepresentation. Now, as we have seen, representational biases are numerous and pervasive. And while women's representation is increasing, class biases are getting worse. So, the world as a whole, women's political power has been growing, but poor people's political power has not been growing. Okay? So the class bias is getting worse. Now, as I was preparing all sorts of different types of biases, I got curious about Korea and Korea National Assembly, and if biases exist in Korean National Assembly as well. So I looked it up. What do you think? Bias, no bias, perfect mirroring? Huh? Nobody dares to shout it out, huh? Okay, let's see. Class and profession bias in Korea. Here, by Korea, I mean Korean National Assembly, 국회. I don't know if you can see these words and numbers very well. But there are 300 National Assembly persons, and out of 300, 79 are labeled as 정당인, or professional politicians. I figured that means that they don't really have a job, right? But anyway, the professional politicians are 79. The second largest group is, interestingly, the 53 out of 300 are professors and researchers. That was somewhat unexpected. And the third largest group is something called 정무직, or high-level bureaucrats. Former ministers, deputy ministers. And then fourth largest group is lawyers. Okay. So the four largest groups, which account for over half of Korean National Assembly, are professional politicians, professors, lawyers, and former bureaucrats. Okay. No blue-collar worker representation, no farmer representation. So class-wise and profession-wise, yes, there is huge bias exists in Korean National Assembly. How about gender? The natural law tells us that the world is composed of 50-50, right? 50% women, 50% men. And if we believe in mirroring, descriptive representation, we gotta have 150 male National Assembly persons and 150 female National Assembly persons. The reality is there are 253 males and 47 females. And you guys are going to change all that, right? You all run for the office, and then 20, 30 years later, you'll all be sitting not at SNU, but at somewhere in Yeouido, right? I believe in you. How about age? Age bias? Yes or no? Yes? Again, as I mentioned, there are 300 National Assembly persons. This is the current National Assembly. There are 9 folks in their 30s, 80 in their 40s, 142 in their 50s, and 69 in their 60s. And I was almost surprised to see that there is no one above the age of 69. I thought that I would see, folks in their 70s and 80s, but apparently there is no one. So extreme elderly is not represented in the Korean National Assembly, but obviously young folks in their 20s and 30s are vastly underrepresented in Korean National Assembly. How about education? Can you see these numbers? Well, look at the bottom row. And out of 300, 9 graduated from high school. And this is an interesting case. There is one person who's still attending college. I don't know who that is. And then 114 who are college graduates. And then 175 who went to graduate school. So over half of Korean National Assembly persons have gone to graduate school. So if you have political aspirations, keep attending schools. After graduation, go to graduate school. After graduate school, get your PhD degree. And you're raising the probability of becoming a National Assembly person. So here the point is, Korean National Assembly is extremely highly educated. Probably better educated than any other legislatures in the world. And also have extremely biased National Assembly education-wise. Undereducated folks are not represented in the Korean Assembly. Okay, so far we have talked about the mirroring and descriptive representation. Now, descriptive representation is not the only concern in political recruitment, and there are reasons for at least some biases in political recruitment. We generally want political elites to be best possible agents for their constituents. We want political leaders to be very able person who can represent our interest. So not only we want them to look like us, we want them to be able, capable person. Okay? And in this view, government officials should be selected for their ability to serve the interests of the citizens, whether or not they share the voters' background characteristics. So according to this theory, there is something that is more important than mirroring. And that something is leaders' ability. We don't want to have unable, illegitimate person to lead us and to make decisions about nationally important issues. For politicians to be good agents, they need to have similar preferences to the citizens they represent. This is mirroring part. But at the same time, they need the appropriate skills to do their jobs. And you get the skills through what? You get the skills through education and experiences. That's where education and age come in. That is, educational bias and age bias come in. Even in the leftist parties, left-wing parties, leadership posts tend to be held by educated professional people rather than members of working class. So when we look at former communist countries, or when we look at left-wing parties in the West, as I mentioned, there are communist parties in Western European countries, socialist parties. When we look at their leadership structure, the leadership positions are not filled by the working class folks. They are filled by highly educated professionals. So it might be a good thing for government officials to be better informed, more intelligent, and more experienced, and perhaps better educated than the people they represent. So this is complete opposite of mirroring, right? This is what we call delegation, and our leaders maybe need to be. So bias is a good thing. Our leaders need to be better educated than us, more experienced than us, and probably older than us. That might be a good thing. Okay? So, as in the case of so many other political choices, there is no obvious or perfect way to choose between mirroring and delegation. Well, we can say mirroring is a good thing, but mirroring may result in mediocrity, meaning that bunch of unable folks, undereducated folks, ending up in the National Assembly and making strange decisions. On the other hand, if we advocate delegation and accept the bias as a matter of fact, then very highly educated and old, more experienced folks will be making decisions for us but they lack representation. They may not think like us. Maybe they make decisions to benefit themselves rather than trying to be our representative. So here the point is, mirroring or delegation between the two, there is no perfect solution. Okay? And each time we cast our votes, we'll be moving back and forth. But we cannot make a definitive judgment about which one is better. Okay? But in the very least, remembering the Korean statistics that we saw, having at least some representation of blue-collar workers and farming sector would be helpful, right? Because as you guys remember, there was virtually no representation of those two sectors in Korean National Assembly right now.